Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm parent coach, mother of four, and your host, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where you will learn that even for parenting experts like me, there is no such thing as a perfect parent, and that fabulous behavior and amazing relationships are right on the other side of that realization. If you're working your butt off to do right by your kid, honor yourself, and go beyond the BS around you, you are my person, and this podcast is for you. Full disclosure, I'm a sometimes potty talker, and we deal with the challenge of raising kids here. This podcast is for grown-ups, so stick your earbuds in and let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm very excited to be here with you today, and today I love the topic that we're talking about. Name of this episode, the topic we're talking about today is pick your battles. How many times have you said this? I hear it a lot from parents, like where I'm hanging out with my girlfriends or like whatever, going out for happy hour or something. And it's like, oh, this, and happened with my kids, but pick your battles, right? And first, I'm going to give you my confession, and then I'm going to go deeper with this concept because I really want you all to think twice about this whole pick your battles thing. Okay, here's my confession. I am a coach. I'm a trained coach. I know exactly how I'm supposed to show up when it comes to coaching, especially with my clients, especially when I'm leading my coaching calls, all of that stuff. I try to bring those principles to bear, even when I'm doing this podcast, when I'm writing my emails, when I'm leading a workshop, all of those things, but never are those coaching skills more paramount than when I'm actually coaching someone, right? But there are a few things that when people say them, they make me want to scream. And I throw out all of my coaching skills and I break all the coaching rules because I become super passionate. We'll use that positive word. I become super passionate about my little soapbox that I get on when I hear these phrases. And pick your battles is one of those phrases. So if you're my client and you've ever watched me break all the coaching rules, you can know that there is something really deep and passionate going on inside of me. And also, I apologize for that. I am human and I can't be perfect all the time. But luckily, this is a podcast. It's not a coaching session. So now I get to actually get on that soapbox and tell you all why the phrase pick your battles makes me want to scream and throw out all the coaching rules when I'm working with clients. Because this is what people usually mean, in my experience, when they say pick your battles. What they really mean is, okay, I set a rule, I set a boundary, my kid broke it or crossed it or whatever, but it's not worth the fallout. It's not worth the headache of enforcing that rule. So screw it, right? Pick your battles. Here's what I want to say. You already picked your battle when you set that boundary. So once you set the boundary, we don't have the luxury anymore as parents of saying, pick your battles. You already did it. You picked it. This is it. This is the battle you picked when you set the boundary. It's not when our kids cross the boundary that we get to decide if we're going to enforce it or not. It's too late. If this is really not something you wanted to enforce, the time to pick your battles was when you set the rule in the first place. And I have tons of experience working with parents who are like, okay, well, we have this rule in our house, but like, I don't really even care about it. Or like, yeah, I told him that he had to eat a bunch of vegetables before he could have treats. But then in the moment, I realized like, I actually don't really care if he eats vegetables. That's a true story that I've had a conversation with clients about. Things like schoolwork. Oh my gosh, my kid didn't get, above a B, and that's the rule in our house. You have to have a B or above, on all of your homework assignments, or there's a consequence. Okay, well, now that's happened, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like doing it. This is where I want to tell you, you already picked the battle. It's too late now. Now, that doesn't mean we can't go and change the quote unquote battle later. But once you've set a boundary and your kid has crossed it, you have to enforce the boundary. You have to follow through with a consequence. After that whole thing is done, once the dust clears and you're back to stasis, you can totally say, you know what? We've decided that this rule is inappropriate, or we're going to address this, we're going to modify it, whatever. It's not like once you've made a rule, you're stuck with it. Especially rules, like think about it. You set a rule when your kid was 4. It's probably doesn't make sense when your kid's 14, right? That's fine. But in the moment, when your kid crosses a boundary is not when you move the boundary. That's not when you decide not to enforce the boundary. Because what is the message we're sending our kids when we do that? So many messages. probably the lowest hanging fruit that you're thinking of is, oh, you don't actually have to follow any rules. Well, yeah, you're right. That is one of the messages we send. But guess what? There's some even worse messages getting sent. Like, you don't really know where you stand with me, kid. I might say something, but that doesn't necessarily mean I actually mean what I say. I might enforce a boundary, I might not. I'm pretty unpredictable. You know, you're pretty much kind of a moving target when you're in a relationship with me. Obviously, that is not the messaging we want to be giving our kids, but that's what happens when we do the whole eye roll, pick your battles thing. So ask yourself before you set the boundary, do I actually care about this? And that is such a crazy question. Like, why aren't we asking ourselves that? Or are we just assuming, well, of course I care about it. I set the rule. But I'm going to tell you how common, super normal it is for me to discover when I'm working with a client that it turns out the reasons why they've set a lot of the boundaries they have nothing to do with their values, with who they are, with what they actually care about, with what their beliefs are. None of that. Most of us come into parenting before we've ever even gotten the kiddo. Before we ever actually become parents, we come to parenting with a huge grab bag of nonsense that we've been schlepping around our entire lives. Stuff like our experiences when we were being parented, what has been normalized for us from our childhood, what some rando at the grocery store told us, what we read in a book, what we've seen on TV. And we use all of that nonsense to come up with an idea of what it's supposed to look like when you're doing a good job as a parent. And if you don't think deeper than that, chances are you've probably got dozens of rules and boundaries and expectations set up in your family that are completely unrelated to who you are and how you actually care that your family runs. I'll give you a really great example of that. Family dinner. How many times have we been told that families who eat together, they are healthier, they have much less odds of their kids turning out quote unquote poorly? You know, I swear by the time I became a mom, before I ever even had a kid, I already had the idea that like if you don't have family dinner, your kid is going to become like a drug addict or a prostitute or something like that. It's definitely going to happen, and it's going to be because you didn't have family dinner. So we had family dinner. I actually never stopped to think if I enjoyed having family dinner, if I actually agreed with all of those, fear mongering ideas that were out there. I just did it. And fast forward to when my kids were about, I'm trying to think, like maybe 10, 8, 6, and like a newborn. And I remember being in a session with my therapist where I was like, dinner time is the worst time. Like, I'm at my wit's end. It's been such a long day. I really need a break. And everyone's fighting, and I have to listen to everyone complain about how crappy the food is. The baby is like, it's the witching hour, which if anyone has dealt with a baby, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like this kid's inconsolable and needs like 100% of your attention, even though you've already given him 100% of your attention all freaking day long. This is not the time that I want to have a kumbaya family moment. And I was literally crying to my therapist about it. And she's like, well, what if your family just doesn't do family dinner? And I looked at her like she was proposing to me that what if you just poke your babies with needles instead of singing them a lullaby at night, right? Like I thought, like, well, family dinners, that's non-negotiable. Only bad parents don't have family dinner. And she's like, well, how is it? Like, do you spend time with your kids besides family dinner? I'm like, oh my God, all I do is spend time with my kids. Like, I pick them up from school. We stay at school afterwards and everybody plays on the playground and we come home and in the morning, I'm the one who helps them get ready. And then we walk to school together. And, and as I was talking, I realized like, we actually do really well when we're one-on-one. Like when I'm just like me and one of my kids, oh my gosh, it's like, rainbows and unicorns, right? But then when we're all getting together, the kids are bickering, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you guys might just be in a chapter of your family's story where you do better one-on-one, and all this family togetherness stuff is just not really a great fit right now for your family. And it was like a revelation. It was like God himself was shining down upon me from the heavens. I was like, oh my gosh, we could just not have family dinner. This is the kind of revelation, like I had picked my battle before I'd even decided if I wanted to. And because I picked my battle, well, you know what? Shit, people, we are having family dinner. So everyone shut the fuck up and sit at this table, right? And then I realized, like, oh, wait, I could pick a different battle. Like, I don't actually need this to be the hill I decide to die on. So do your due diligence before you set the boundary. Okay. And if you've already set the boundary and you haven't changed it yet, and your kiddo, like right now, today, sometime today, after you've listened to this podcast, you're going to hear your kiddo's going to cross some boundary that maybe now you realize you want to change, but you haven't yet. You got to fight the fight. Once you pick the battle, you got to fight the fight. You have to follow through and enforce that boundary. But give yourself permission that once that's all done, you can reevaluate. That's part of what working with me is. It's that reevaluation process. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to actually reconsider some of these boundaries I've set, I love that for you. And how amazing would it be for you to realize that like half the battles you've picked, you can just let go and just really focus on the things that actually matter. It's so freeing. Gosh, deciding to give up family dinner for a while was like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. So there you go. Maybe I've inspired some people to move away from family dinner rule. And with that example, I sort of have answered the question that I was asked for today, which was from a listener who said, you know, do you believe that family dinner is truly important? Well, I think I've revealed my answer to that question. No, I don't. I do believe that family togetherness is important. And I believe that what's most important is for us to figure out what that means to us and for our family. And if family dinner is not that thing for you, then I give you all the blessings in the world to release yourself from that straitjacket and come up with a different way. So that's my one last piece of advice for everyone. If you decide to abandon this whole family dinner idea, challenge yourself to come up with what's your alternative. And it doesn't have to be all the family together at the same time. If you're not there yet, that's okay. Just make sure that you're having those moments with your kids somehow throughout the week. It does not have to be at dinner time. It does not have to be all together at once. So I hope that's helpful for you. If you want to get your question answered, I want to answer it. So go to my website, AnnKaplanParentCoach.com, and just use the contact form. Send me your question and you'll get to hear your question answered on the next episode, perhaps, or a future episode, I should say. And I can't wait to give you another episode of Confessions of a Parent Coach coming up for you next week. Bye, everybody. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.